John McClain, welcome back to Tuscaloosa. I hope you're doing well, sir.
I'm doing great, Ryan. How are you?
Hey, very good. Just celebrating another national title here in Tuscaloosa.
That was a great game. I enjoyed watching it. I was happy for Saban. Always fun to see Nick express emotion, especially when it's positive.
And he said after the game that this was the happiest that he had ever been in, and 5 national championships in 9 years. You go back, and we always love to talk with those. We had Jerry Glanville a couple of weeks ago to talk about the footsteps and the foundation that was built in Houston that went on to be the best college football coach in the country and that this game's ever seen.
Yeah, I think aren't he and Bear Bryant tied?
Yes, sir.
With national championships.
Yes, sir.
So that means to have that clear distinction, Nick's going to have to win another one. As long as he's coaching, they're going to be the favorite every year. That's what amazes me is the way they wear that mantle so heavily, but it doesn't weigh them down. And another thing, it's almost like when they don't win, it's a bigger surprise than when they do. Although this past season, I think, it's not often you see Alabama play and people think somebody else is going to beat them because that's just never the case. But I'm also amazed at how coaches come and go. And he's like the Patriots. He just finds ways to replace them, and almost those moves are almost always right.
Well, and we were just talking about that with Dennis Dodd just a couple of minutes ago. When you begin to look at that call at halftime, it was an excellent call because even Nick Saban would have probably been questioned if he would have stuck with his starting quarterback and been able to lose the game at the end of the day.
I'll tell you an interesting story, Ryan. June Jones, longtime NFL coach, was head coach of Atlanta and San Diego, had 3 stints here with the University of Houston, the Gamblers of the USFL, and he was on the staff that Nick Saban coached on under Jerry Glanville. June was retired after he got fired at SMU. He went back to Hawaii where he has 2 homes, and he's a volunteer at a high school there as offensive coordinator. And he told me 2 years ago he had a kid who was going to be a senior who had a chance to be the best quarterback he had at that level, and he was going to Alabama. And I said, why in the world is a white kid going to Alabama? They always go on the West Coast so they can stay close to home. He said he fell in love with Saban and the tradition, and he said, keep an eye on him. He told me his name, and I couldn't pronounce it. And then when I was watching the game and he came out, I texted June. I said, is this the guy? He said, yep, and his younger brother's going there too. He's got a chance to be even better.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. I went out and watched him, and it's – John, have you ever been where you see somebody, and this was last spring when I first watched Tua Tagovailoa throw, and I came back and I was trying to judge whether I come back. You don't want to ever amp somebody up that it's not even reachable. You ever been in that situation where you see somebody and you're like, well, what do you tell the audience? And I just made up my mind. I said, I'm going to tell them what I saw. This is the greatest passer I've seen in a long time at that age in college football.
One thing I learned a long time ago, Ryan, especially going to the combine, it doesn't matter how they look in their shorts and their underwear. It doesn't matter how in their T-shirts. It doesn't matter how they look in practice when they're not getting hit and guys are not being covered. There's only one way to judge them. And I remember a lot of people thought Saban was nuts when he made that move. And then you see why they brought him all the way from Honolulu to be the quarterback. And I thought Jalen Hurts handled himself with such class. There was really not a big reason for the media to focus so much on him as they did after the game, but he handled it with such class. Now I'm curious, does he stay knowing the little brother's coming, or does he go? And but it's a good problem to have when you got too many and they're all good.
John, let me ask you, will you go back to Saban and the Houston Oilers? Is there anything that stands out with an interaction that you had with Nick Saban that is something that sticks out about his assistant coach's days there in the NFL?
Not with me, because at the time, Nick hardly talked. Now, I knew he talked with the players because the players were always complaining about him kicking them out of meetings. And the personnel director at that time, he wouldn't become the general manager, he liked to go in person into the position meetings. His name is Mike Olivac. And Mike told me in '88, he said, I really like this new DB coach. I said, really? I said, I've never even heard him talk. He said, oh, he talks to those players. He gives their attention. He doesn't put up with any BS. If they break his rules, they're out of the meeting. He said, I got to keep an eye on him. He said, I think he got a chance to be special. And then when Nick left to go to the University of Toledo, I told a friend of mine from Fox, and we joke about this all the time because we're both still here in our jobs. I said, boy, Nick Saban is going to have to be an NFL coach because he can't talk. Can't talk, how are you going to recruit? No way he's going to be able to recruit. And he left Toledo after a year and went to Cleveland. I said, see, I told you, there's no way he's ever going to be able to coach in college football.
John McClain right now from the Houston Chronicle. John, I'd love to pick your brain here a couple of minutes. AJ McCarron becomes a unrestricted free agent yesterday. Any thoughts about AJ McCarron and getting that status?
Well, sure. It's gotten a lot of attention. Most people thought he would win that grievance, and it's not the best year to be unrestricted because there's so many quarterbacks. If you count, I don't count Lamar Jackson as a first-round pick, but I think Mason Rudolph could make it. That would be 5 potential quarterbacks going in the first round. Then you've got Kirk Cousins. Good chance you're going to have Mike Glennon. There's going to be other quarterbacks who are unrestricted. And I'm not talking about Drew Brees. He's going to re-sign with New Orleans. But the thing about McCarron, he's only thrown, I think, 6 passes the last 2 years. But if you go back and look at the film of those at the end of 2015 when Andy Dalton suffered a broken thumb and he had to replace him, at the end of that season, he did really well. He didn't throw an interception. I think he had 4 or 5 touchdown passes, completed about 65%. And his rating was at least 100, and people liked him. Now, in the playoff game, they almost beat Pittsburgh, and it wasn't his fault that the Steelers won it. There was some brain-dead plays by 2 defensive players that got penalties. And so right then, if he'd have become unrestricted, then he would have been in demand. He's still going to be in demand. And what I can't wait to see is when Hugh Jackson as the coach at Cleveland, and it's amazing that he kept his job. You have a new GM and a new personnel department. There were reports that the Browns offered 2nd and 3rd round picks for McCarron at the trading deadline and didn't get the paperwork in fast enough. Now, that may have been the best thing that ever happened to him, to not have to go to Cleveland. Now, it's a new regime. You don't know what influence that Jackson will have with the new regime, but if he had convinced the previous bosses, Sashi Brown, the general manager, to offer 2 and a 3, then that means he really likes McCarron because he coached him with Cincinnati. So it seems to me that would be the best landing spot. But because McCarron is so untested and has so little on tape recently, you can't get him and plan on him just being a starting quarterback like San Francisco did with Jimmy Garoppolo. He should be in a competitive situation where he can win the job, but you can't just give it to him.
Is there any other jobs out there that you think he would be a good fit other than Cleveland? I mean, do you see something out there that you would like where he would fit in that system?
Only know what teams need quarterbacks. In Arizona, new coach, so we don't know about Steve Wilkes or his offense. Then Denver needs a quarterback. They're going to let Brock Osweiler go. I think they're going to keep Simeon. And Minnesota, like Arizona, has no quarterback under contract. And they're trying to argue that Teddy Bridgewater should have 1 more year. I think they'll lose that grievance too. So both of those teams, they need a veteran and they need a rookie. So I'm guessing Arizona or Cleveland. And I could see Cleveland, which has 3 second-round picks, trading for McCarron, and then using the 1st and 4th picks on like Saquon Barkley and Bradley Chubb, the defensive end and pass rusher, and then maybe drafting the quarterback in the 2nd round to compete with McCarron.
We're talking to John McClain. John, you wrote an article here in the Houston Chronicle just a couple of days ago, some advice for Johnny Manziel. Head north and go and play in the Canadian Football League. It just, as a matter of fact, we just talked about June Jones. He's up there in the Canadian Football League. That would be your advice to Johnny Manziel if he wants to clean up his image.
Well, first of all, when June Jones was head coach at SMU, he wanted it, and he didn't have a chance to get him because he was going to A&M, as Alabama fans know all too well. And so he's had all these problems. June Jones is not afraid to take on reclamation projects. He did it with Colt Brennan in Hawaii, and they ended up in the Sugar Bowl. Last year, he was, like I mentioned earlier, volunteering at high school in Hawaii, and a friend of his at the Hamilton Tiger Cats called and said, "We're 0-8. Our offense is awful. Help." So he went, took over the offense. The guy soon turned over the head coaching job so he could focus on personnel. And they went 6-4 and averaged 33 points a game in their last 6. And Jeremiah Mazzoli, who went to 3 colleges and had off-the-field issues at Oregon, he was the one that was a quarterback. And so he wants Johnny Manziel. Manziel should go, spend 2 years there, repair his image, improve his game in a system that is tailor-made for him. And then in 2 seasons, Ryan, you'd have June Jones, a respected, longtime NFL coach, calling general managers and coaches saying, "This kid turned around his career. He worked hard. You'd be crazy not to consider him." And he's going to play 2 games in some spring league. That's not a good body of work. But he's had this opportunity to go to Canada. You know, they don't start till June. Maybe he'll change his mind. But I thought Vince Young earlier when he was cut by the NFL, Robert Griffin III, who was out of football last year, those guys should have also gone to Canada. They were all relatively young, played 2 years, come back unrestricted, and have a whole lot of good tape for your new potential suitors to see.
John, how good can Deshaun Watson be?
I'll just put it like this, Ryan. When he started the second game. The reason he didn't start the first game is because he was not as good as Tom Savage in the off-season program, the preseason or training camp. And then when Savage was getting mauled by the Jaguars in the first game, sacked 6 times in the first half, they put him in. He threw a touchdown pass, got sacked 4 times. And then he had a quick turnaround on the Thursday at Cincinnati in a nationally televised game. And Bill O'Brien, we all thought would go back to Savage. He stuck with it. In those 6 games, they averaged 34 points a game. In his last 5 starts, they averaged 39. In 4 games, he got to play with his starting receivers, DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller. They averaged 40.5. He was on a pace to throw 43 touchdowns and run for 6. He still, in those 6 starts and 7 games, ended up with the best average per attempt because he threw the ball down the field. He threw more touchdowns at his point, 19 in the season, than anybody in history. And he's a great leader and a great kid, as all college football fans know. And I told him, I said, "You're going to add a couple more years onto my career. And I can't wait to see him get back. I'm ready for training camp. He'll be 100%. He'll participate in some organized team activities, and he'll be 100% when training camp begins. And everything they do this offseason, Ryan, will be to rebuild their offensive line and do everything they can to help him on offense."
McClain on NFL. You can find him, McClain_on_NFL on the Twitter account. Go follow him. Join those 140,000 folks that follow John McClain. HoustonChronicle.com, longtime NFL veteran of the business. Can be heard also on Sports Radio 610 in Houston and 104.5 The Zone in Nashville. John, thank you again for giving us 15 minutes of your time on a Friday afternoon here in Tuscaloosa.
Ryan, it's my pleasure anytime. I always enjoy coming on with you and talking to all those great Alabama fans. Thank you. Congratulations to the Tide on that most recent championship, and roll Tide.